Hello everybody. It is March 19th, 2025 here in the United States of America. And in today's video I'd like to talk about the decision made by the Houthis to declare that they would openly target American ships, largely due to the ceasefire between Hamas and Israel falling apart. Now imagine that. The ceasefire between Hamas and Israel didn't last longer than a few weeks. Who saw that coming? I definitely didn't. Listen, trying to get these two groups to adhere to any kind of ceasefire is probably the hardest thing on the planet to negotiate from an outside perspective. If you're a mediator trying to get these two political entities to come to some kind of long-term truce is probably the most difficult thing you could ever undertake. Good luck. I'm not going to assume one side or the other is fully responsible for breaking the ceasefire. I don't know all the details. One side claims, Hamas would claim that, Israel violated the ceasefire first, that's why they didn't get the hostages back. And then Israel claims that, we didn't get the hostages back in the first place. We didn't violate the ceasefire. Us not getting the hostages back in a timely manner is a violation of the ceasefire, and it gives us the right to resume bombardment of the Gaza Strip. And that's what Israel did. So in response, the Houthis now have openly declared that they will target American warships. Now they have launched missiles at American warships over the past few months, but I don't think they've ever actually openly declared that they would do so. Now they've openly, essentially declared war on the U.S. military. I think this is a foolish move on their part. Reason being is, again, launching a few cruise missiles at Israel or like a random cruise missile at an American ship doesn't really accomplish anything politically. And I don't think at this point the Palestinian resistance can accomplish anything politically. Despite Israel's bombardment and near destruction of the Gaza Strip, the Israeli government has faced really no consequences for any of it. I think Hamas's operation on October 7th didn't achieve anything at all. I mean, sure, it achieved strategic surprise against the Israelis and, could initially be described as a defeat for the IDF, because essentially it was. But in response, Gaza was obliterated, destroyed, rendered almost uninhabitable. I mean, the unfortunate, brutal reality of it is, I don't think most of the Palestinians that live in Gaza that had their homes destroyed will ever have their homes rebuilt. The Arab world can throw their arms up, and outrage as much as they want, but I think everybody knows they're really not going to do anything about it. It's all posturing. Turkey's never going to do anything about it, regardless of what it says about Israel. The Saudis, the Iranians, Iraqis, again, the Arab world, talks a big game. They talk very loudly about certain issues, but in all reality, they can't really do anything. And Iran is in no position to do much of anything either in regards to helping the Palestinian cause, because Syria has fallen under the influence of the Turks and Israel. And they do not at this point possess a land bridge to supply Hezbollah fighters in Lebanon. So I don't want to say Hezbollah is completely isolated, but they're much more isolated than they had been in the past. And I think Syria, unfortunately for the Palestinian resistance, was the linchpin of the entire thing, and it was a house of cards. And once it became obvious that Syria wasn't going to, or the Assad regime in Syria wasn't going to last and couldn't stand on its own 2 feet anymore, it took over a decade of sanctions and a horrific civil war to finally gut the regime enough politically and financially to where it fell. But once it fell, that centerpiece, that cornerstone, that land bridge that was so crucial to the Palestinian resistance, once that's gone, there's really not much politically that can be done. And I'm not saying this as someone who is advocating for the support of that particular cause. I don't live, I'm an American, I don't live, believe it or not, vicariously through other people's political causes like so many people in the West do. My cause is America. You know what I mean? That's the only thing I would really openly, fervently support. Now, I have my opinions on the Israel-Hamas conflict and everything that's happened since, and I have my own personal feelings on the decisions made by all parties involved, but I am not going to fly the flag of either side. Now, I am sympathetic to all the civilians that have been killed. I'm sympathetic to all the Orthodox Christians, me being one, that are caught in the middle of this conflict. And I pray that it does end soon because of all the death and destruction. But again, I'm not going to sit here and fly an Israeli or Palestinian flag. I'm going to talk about things, how I see them, and give you my straightforward opinion on what's actually happening. But so what the Houthis have done is, I think what they are trying to do is be that voice in the Arab world that finally stands up and says, enough is enough. We're not going to take this anymore. We're not going to tolerate American influence over the Middle East, and by extension Israeli influence over the Middle East. We're going to be the ones that finally stand up against stand up for the Palestinian cause. And maybe in the hope they can set a good example, show how brave they are, and rally more Arab countries to their cause. But again, the Arab countries aren't interested in actually getting into a regional conflict with Israel, especially with Israel still having the backing of the United States, because people need to keep in mind Israel has a very large lobby in the United States politically. It's really not controversial to say it. It's true. AIPAC is a thing. Israel is able to influence the American government, both parties, pretty substantially, to get weapons and security guarantees and financial support. That's just a fact. There's a lot of Americans that aren't happy about that, but good luck getting rid of AIPAC. It's probably not going to happen. Like I said, they have a lot of influence over both parties, Republican and Democrat. And even if, Donald Trump, for example, you might have voted for him and agree with all of his domestic policies, but one thing you'll probably never get Trump to cave on is his support for Israel. It's just the way it is in this country. Maybe one day that'll change. Maybe one day the American government won't be so influenced by outside lobbyists, but as of right now, they are. And so Israel will continue to get support. So the Arab countries in the region aren't going to launch any kind of military operation to save the Palestinians. They might try to apply diplomatic pressure. They might say, well, we won't normalize ties with Israel. But at the end of the day, they're still going to do business with the United States, and they're not actually going to launch any kind of military operation against Israel. I mean, really, the only thing that could change things in the region and result in some kind of two-state solution would be a complete change in the Israeli government. But that's up to the Israelis. If they continue to vote for the Likud party and hardliners, well, nothing's going to change. You have a lot of politicians in Israel that are pretty adamant about having a greater Israel, a united Israel, and Israel free of Palestinians as a people. They might claim they don't want that, but many Israeli politicians do indeed advocate for expunging all Palestinians from their land and it being, purely theirs, and also annexing surrounding regions. That's just a fact. Politically, that is a position in Israel that has, some popular backing behind it. So really all the Houthis have managed to do is just make themselves a liability, I think, in the long run. The Iranians, despite what they say, and despite the fact they do have one of the best militaries in the region, do not want a direct confrontation with the United States of America. Absolutely not. Now, if the Houthis are successful in striking an American ship, I don't think Iran wants to be on the hook for being the nation that sent the Houthis that missile, or the nation that's offering direct support to the Houthis. I think they would prefer to wash their hands of it rather than be pulled into a regional conflict that wouldn't be beneficial. Because Iran, again, Iranian politicians have their own internal interests. The Palestinian cause is not the first thing on the list that the average Iranian politician is concerned with, despite the rhetoric coming out of some of these countries. Again, like every other country, they have their own internal affairs to worry about. They might have concerns with the economy, managing the economy in the face of sanctions, military issues with Israel, issues with internal dissent. And if they have to choose between cutting ties with the Palestinian cause and existing as a nation, I would say they would probably cut ties with the Palestinian cause before they commit national suicide and sacrifice their regime for, again, like I said, unfortunately, and a lot of people that support the Palestinian cause don't want to hear this. I would say at this point, it's a lost cause. And the Houthis openly talking about striking American ships is probably going to hurt their cause more than it would help. And again, lobbing just a few cruise missiles at Israel isn't going to politically or militarily change the situation. I mean, yeah, it's a show of force, and again, it's meant to be a propaganda victory for them, to show the Arab world, to prove to the Arab world that we can stand up, we can fight back. But again, I think it's a losing effort. I don't think it will accomplish much. And in return, though, I don't think American airstrikes are going to do anything to the Houthis either. One thing that Arabs are very good at is asymmetrical warfare and guerrilla warfare. These people aren't stupid. They know how to hide weapons. They know how to hide phone signals. They know how to move things around quickly. If they launch a missile, they know how to move that missile launcher somewhere else very quickly and discreetly to make sure that the return fire misses and doesn't strike the area where the launcher currently is. And American airstrikes might, be a very public show of force, but again, I don't think they're actually going to accomplish much of anything. Generally speaking, when it comes to military conflict, air campaigns don't defeat militaries by themselves. If you really want to root somebody out, you have to have boots on the ground. And America is never going to launch a ground invasion of Yemen. Trump can't do that politically. He can't swing that. He knows he can't. The Saudis tried it. The Saudis failed miserably. They're not going to root out the Houthis. And the official government of Yemen isn't going to do anything either. So in all reality, I don't see anything coming out of this situation that could be a victory for either side. I think it's just going to be a continuation of a couple cruise missiles fly at American ships or targets in Israel. They get shot down. America responds with some airstrikes that don't really hit anything, and the cycle just continues. And I don't think the Houthis will accomplish much of anything. And also, another thing they need to consider is when you start to threaten global shipping, well, again, nations are going to put their economies and trade above someone else's foreign cause. Like, countries in the region aren't going to sacrifice their stability again to support a cause that they don't feel can be won. As much as they don't want to admit it, I think most Arab governments already know that the Palestinian cause, given the Israeli government, and unless things change in Israel drastically, isn't something that's a victory is not achievable in that situation. So I think their populations might not like it, but I think they know the reality, the political reality of the situation in the region, in the Gulf. And most Arab leaders, despite the rhetoric, are pragmatic leaders who, again, consider their own internal affairs before the affairs of others, which, again, is why the Iranians, as much as people might have said they wanted it, they weren't going to march an army across Syria into Lebanon to fight the Israelis. It was never going to happen. Again, because that would risk a direct war with the United States, and they don't want that. It's just the reality of it. And openly targeting American warships, again, I would think in the long run would make the Houthis a liability in the region. I feel like nobody wants to be caught red-handed, giving them direct financial and military support if they do specifically target American ships and if they manage to hit one. I think they're just isolating themselves in the future and probably hurting the cause that they fight for more than anything else. I mean, it feels good to stand up and say, I will not surrender. I will fight back. Look at me, guys. I'm the one who stood strong in the face of our enemy. But also, too, people need to think rationally, logically. And I don't think they are looking at things in a pragmatic in realistic way. I think maybe part of the strategy is to try to pull the United States into a direct regional conflict, either to try to humiliate the United States militarily or politically, because one of the things that President Trump ran on was, no more Middle Eastern wars, no more wars in general. And maybe they feel that he's belligerent enough where he'll take the bait and get the United States fully involved in a war on Israel's behalf, which there's plenty of people in the United States that lobby for that want it, that want a direct confrontation with Iran. Maybe they're baiting the United States into that. I don't know. I don't think it'll work. I don't think Trump's going to, in all reality, actually take the bait. I think there's enough people around him that would convince him not to get involved in a regional war against Iran directly. Politically, I think it would be disastrous for him. I don't think he wants to hurt the chances of whoever runs for president in 2028 being associated with those decisions. So ultimately, at the end of the day, I think targeting American warships specifically is not to the advantage of the Houthis, and interfering with global trade, again, like, they don't have enough leverage to really influence hard political decisions that would make any real lasting change in Israel with the Palestinian issue. I think the reality is, I think Israel leveled the Gaza Strip to make it uninhabitable so the Palestinians couldn't return. That is a very brutal thing to do. But politically, there's plenty of people in Israel that want the Palestinians off that section of land, and that's the only solution that they see. I don't agree with it. I wouldn't ever advocate for ethnic cleansing, but I don't see a way forward where the Palestinians are going to be able to stay on that strip of land long term, given the politics of the region. I don't see a way forward for the Palestinian resistance to achieve their political goals. I think Israel is much closer to achieving theirs, and despite the outrage from the rest of the world, it hasn't stopped them, and I don't think it will. But anyways, if everyone out there liked my analysis, please drop me a like and subscribe to my channel, and I will be making another video on Saturday. So see you then.